as we build up to the first test on Thursday, Australia v Pakistan. Just talking about the team will be pretty predictable. So I think we know what the 11 is going to be, and also the David Warner situation with Mitch Johnson, and also who will be the opener, if it is an opener, to replace David Warner when his time is up. One man that will be all over it, it's the wisdom and experience on a Monday, is Robert Crash Craddock, who joins us. Hello, Crash.
G'day, Jules. Yeah, I always love first test week, and particularly in Perth, Optus Stadium. It's not the Wacker, which we love for its wildness and rawness, but it's still good fun.
It is good fun, and it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a pretty firm watch on the size of the crowd for what they're calling now the West Test. Are you confident or more hopeful the locals will get out and support this test match?
Hopeful. I have to say there were really modest crowds last year against the West Indies, but that was part of the Justin Langer fallout when he was sacked as coach. And then, of course, after that, Justin was used to promote this test as a way of sort of healing the wounds. They're not a great draw card, Pakistan. They never have been. But I understand ticket sales have been only so-so. So you can't really say it's it's a reaction to the snubbing of Bancroft or the Langer situation. I do think the crowds for Pakistan will be pretty soft this series.
There seems to be some thought in the West that, moving the test matches from the Wacker over to the Perth Stadium has been a reason behind the crowd drop-off. But it'd be fair to say the crowds weren't great at the Wacker in the latter years for test matches.
Yeah, it was just a deceptive because the Wacker only held, 22,000. So if you got 17,000 there, it looked to be heaving. And I got to be honest, Jules, was a mad Wacker, man. I just it was something about like walking into a Wild West saloon when you walked into the Wacker. It was rough and it was raw, but it was real. Just you could really hear the crowd so strongly, and the wicket would bounce, and the slips would be back 25 metres, and just the whole vibe of it. And it's they've done a really good drop in wicket at Optus Stadium, but it's just when it's a quarter full, it just doesn't sort of like shake, rackle, and roll in the way that the Wacker did it in a very much a Wild West saloon sort of fashion.
And in fairness to our friends in WA, they've been a little bit unlucky. I mean, the West Indies is not a draw card, and the heat at times, particularly for the Indian Test match, was pretty tough for people to go and sit out in the heat. Just before we continue with the Test, Crash, hasn't been a great start to the Big Bash. What did you make of what happened in Geelong last night?
I thought it was poor because if you're having a relatively new first-class ground and to hosting major fixtures, the single most underrated part of that is the covers. And it's so often the one that they forget most. And to have a wicket that's not properly covered, I thought was a cardinal sin in the modern day. The sneaky part of me, Jules, being a dodgy deck man from way back, I was sort of hoping that they'd just keep playing.
You wanted to see some vicious sort of stuff out there, did you, Crash?
Well, it's just, the person I thought about when I was watching it, strangely enough, was Marnus Labuschagne, who goes to Bunnings in the off-season, buys these mats and puts metal little trinkets on them so that the ball darts hither and thither around, and he loves it. Like, he plays backyard or indoor cricket against his mates, and if you get 17 or 18 like in an innings before being 4 or 5 men out, you've done really well. A part of Marnus would have loved to bat on that, but you have to be honest, it was substandard. You can't, for all the, as I said, 20% of me was thinking, geez, I'd love this match to go its full course. Because, sometimes I think cricket, particularly the Big Bash, can try and be too sort of puritanical. Like, I know the big bosses are fearful of any critical word of the Big Bash or anything like that, and you get the phone call, what were you thinking? Whereas sports like rugby league, they just let it roll. They just think publicity's great. It's rugby league is a bushfire that just keeps burning, and they don't mind that because it attracts debate and everything like that. So Yeah, it's been with a washout in that game last night. It hasn't been the greatest of starts, I have to say, but there's been some not nice fare in amongst it too.
There has. I mean, thankfully, and no one did get hurt, so we don't want to be alarmist about it. But when you hear Nick Maddinson say at the Tox, the wicket is soaked, we're just going to bowl and see how we go. Should have the game started at all?
Probably not, but I do get it. Sometimes I don't mind calling a game off as opposed to abandoning. Like they've given it a chance, haven't they? The result was the same. Points were shared. I mean, and wickets are so hard to read, Jules. I've known wickets that people have said, "Oh, gee, bowl on this and you'll be all out for 60," and teams have made 360. So sometimes you've just got to have a look at it. But look, it was apparent from the first 10 balls of the match, and Aaron Hardy is one of the top run scorer in the competition last year, and missed these first 6 deliveries, couldn't even get bat on ball. So it took us all back to the backyard, Christmas Day, where there's been a thunderstorm, and your big brother's got the new ball, and you're thinking, gee, I don't want to face up on this, but you do, and you just can't get bat on ball. It was quite an exhilarating little 30 balls, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. You couldn't take your eyes off it, no doubt about that. We saw what happened in Canberra on the weekend, which was pretty freakish, really, the storm overnight. So I don't think anyone's really being too critical of the ground staff up there at Manuka. But is it a little bit archaic, the way we still cover pitches and what we use? Or is there a better way?
Yeah, it's no. You've just got to be really thorough and exhaustive about it, and it was the same crime, wasn't it, as Geelong, like the non-properly covered pitch, and it's as I say, it's the single most underrated mistake used by grounds that aren't totally frequent in having first-class matches. Canberra should have been up to it. They really should have. I mean, they're a test venue, so no excuse there.
Just looking ahead to the Test series against Pakistan, I mean, it was a pretty docile pitch up there at Manuka Oval, but Shan Masood made the double 100. They got Babar Azam. They got Shaheen Afridi. Are we underestimating this Pakistan team a little bit? Everyone just seems to assume that, given their poor record in Australia will just wallop them 3-0. But is that a little bit disrespectful to this Pakistan team?
A tad, although they've never been as big as there's some of their parts. Australia grows, as Greg Chappell said in his column. Australia is bigger than the sum of its parts. Pakistan is smaller. They always have been. There's always been so many internal forces. And I feel where Pakistan cricket is at the moment was summed up by the astonishingly stupid appointment of Salman Butt.
How does that happen, Crash?
Just to explain to people, Salman Butt was the guy the captain who was paid by the News of the World in a secret sting to organise his bowlers to play no balls, to bowl no balls at Lords, and he was appointed as selector for about 24 hours. The reason why was he's a great mate of the head selector, Wahab Riaz, a former fast bowler, who wanted him there and saw this as part of his rehabilitation. But every other, thank goodness, some wise heads in Pakistan, including Ramiz Raja, the former chairman of Pakistan Cricket, said, "What? You've brought him back? I mean, what about the optics of it? How does it look? A guy banned for match fixing being a selector? Are you kidding?" So we should be so grateful for our system, really, Jules, because I'll give you an example. Pat Cummins, he was nursed through the system when he had a bad back. Yep. He barely played for about 2 or 3 seasons. I promise you, there's been Pat Cumminses in Pakistan who would have played 1 or no tests and never been heard of again. There's a whole series of them, of these. I remember a really fast bowler they had, Mohammad Zahir. What happened to him? They get a back injury, they don't get the right treatment, they disappear. So you've got to be tough to make it. And I love them. I always find them such an interesting team, just for, they spit out a Wasim Akram, they're probably one of the great bowlers of all time, and they're so interesting to watch. And there'll be that sort of player this tour. Will it be Babar Azam again? Shaheen Shah Afridi. They're brilliant players, but they just struggle to put it all together.
So what are you looking forward to most in this 3-match series between Australia and Pakistan? I mean, they've lost 16 tests in a row in Australia going back to 95, so that doesn't inspire you with much confidence. But what are you looking forward to the most?
Well, I think there's just a few little enchanting storylines. What's going to happen to David Warner? Will he get to Sydney? If he fails in Perth, will the chatter start? Well, here's a simple one. When David walks out to bat in Perth, what sort of reception will he get at Optus Stadium, where they still feel that Cameron Bancroft took the rap for Sandpaper Gate and all that? So that's the intriguing storyline for me in the summer. And I'm also hopeful that I know he hasn't poked his nose through in the first test selection, but that Lance Morris, the wild thing, does get a test at some point. I think that'll be interesting. And I'm very much looking forward to when Warner does retire, the new opening batsman, Jules, because I'll ask you this question.
Will it be an opener?
Well, that's the thing. Do you go the traditional way and put in a Renshaw or a Bancroft who, like Khawaja, is so sedate and calm? Or do you say, no, we'll take our nod from Bazball, even though you'd never admit it, and say to Mitchell Marsh, Mitchell, there's 5 blokes tied up in the slips cordon when the new ball's been bowled. Why don't you go out there and give it a bit of Larry Dooley and just see how you go for about 35 minutes and have a new style of opener for whom, 39 off 38 balls, much like Bazball, is a pass mark. And while that's happening, Khawaja is just getting nicely settled at the other end. I must admit, Jules, I'll be interested in your thoughts, but I like that way. And I wrote in the paper the other day that, the really frustrating thing about Bazball for us, the things that's really irritating, was that it actually worked. It did work.
For a while.
Well, hey, guess what? If there's no rain in that test, England win the test series 3-2.
Yeah.
They were storming home. And Greg Baum wrote a great column, and that's the thing that he said, damn it. He said, Bazball works. It does work, that aggressive philosophy. And I don't think there's any shame in Australia sending out Mitch Marsh. His dad was an opener. His brother was an opener. He's open with the white ball. Could he stand up to Bumrah and Shami next season, though? That's the big one.
That's the question, isn't it? We've got some big home summers to come after this one, starting with India. I mean, how big of a risk is that? I guess that's the thing, isn't it, Crash? Whatever you think about Dave Warner, we have been spoilt for a long time because of the pace that he scores at.
It is true. It's the single most underestimated thing about Warner is his strike rate of 70. Just the combined stats. A batting average of 44 opening the batting and a strike rate of 70. That is outstanding, really. And I know he's been out of form for 3 years, and I know that, look, would I have had him in this next test? I'm not sure. I get why. They couldn't quite find the replacement they wanted. But his record is outstanding, and he's a really hard man to replace. To the point where I don't think there'll be another David Warner. But the one thing that I do like is trying to replicate his tempo. To try to get someone like Marsh to have a bit of a crack. And, of course, by putting Marsh up the order, you then find room for Cameron Green, who's going to be there for 10 years. And as Mitchell Johnson pointed out, Jules, 8 of the 11 players in this test team are 32 years or above.
And you don't want them all to go at the same time, as Ricky Ponting said on the weekend. 2 more questions about the opening spot. So in your mind, we're ruling out Labuschagne going to the top. We're ruling out Travis Head going to the top. So it's either Mitch Marsh goes to the top of the order or a specialist opener comes in. Is that how you see it?
Yes. Labuschagne doesn't want to bat there, and so he's out for mine. And if a number 3 3 is a high position in the order. If he says I'm happy at 3, you wouldn't do it against his wishes. I get it. Cameron Bancroft, I still feel that, last year where he mentioned about the fast bowlers when someone said, do you think they knew about ball tampering? And he said, what did he say? Something, I think it's pretty obvious or something like that. Then they released a statement. I don't think they've ever properly healed from there, but I don't know. But I certainly doesn't help his chances. And I feel Marcus Harris is sliding.
Yep.
And the thing about Bancroft is it's okay painting him as a heartbreak kid, but he has played 10 tests and averaged 26. They don't feel they owe him one thing. They don't.
But didn't the likes... early days Matthew Hayden's test record was similar to that, and he got another chance.
He did, but Hey, here's the thing. Cameron Bancroft's first-class average is late 30s, I think. Matthew Hayden's was scoring one stage. I think his batting average was 57 in first-class cricket. Like it was he was scoring 5 centuries in about 8 Sheffield Shield games. Like it was. His form surge was outrageous. You're quite right, though. I remember when Matthew Hayden had an average of 23 in Test cricket, and Steve Waugh said at a press conference, he'll double this, and he did. He ended up averaging 50 with 30 centuries and 100 Tests. So, yeah, there is that sort of player, but it was the thing they always liked about Hayden was his sort of gung-ho-ness, his front-footedness, and he'd get at him, whereas Bancroft's more sedate. And if you're going to be a more sedate player, you've got to be good. You've got to be good to get their nod.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Some people have compared, putting Labuschagne to the top like Justin Langer, but Justin Langer was an outstanding number 3 when he was put to the top. He's averaging 39. Labuschagne averages 53. Just on one more on David Warner, hand on heart crash. Even if he fails twice in Perth, he's going to get to Sydney, isn't he?
Unless Australia loses the first test. If Australia had a landslide loss in the first test and David Warner scores 6 and 4, that would be the only way he wouldn't get to Sydney. But I tell you what's not going to happen. They're not going to drop him after the second test. Because he would. That's too far. Like that's he'll get to Sydney. But I, as I said to you last week, Jules, I've got him 95% certain of being in the playing all 3 tests. I just think having made the decision to choose him in the series, I don't see how you could drop him mid-series. Some people, strongly disagree with that. I'm out in the public and I'm hearing, a lot of people saying I agree with Mitchell Johnson. He shouldn't have been there. And but the only thing I'll say in Warner's defence is that when he was asked in England, how long would you like to play for? He sort of said, well, ideally I'd like to get to Sydney. That'd be my last test. I'd like that. He said, but I've got to score the run. So he didn't ask for a guarantee, nor was he given one.